We've been using Brown Davis long-range tanks now for some time. And there's no doubt about it, when you get yourself out into those really remote locations, having that extra fuel in your tank makes all the difference. But not only that, having something that is built tough for Australian conditions. On All for Adventure, we definitely put things through their paces. So having that peace of mind that you're not going to have any fuel dramas out there, and you're going to have that little bit of extra fuel when you do need it, when you're trying to stretch that last little bit to get across those really remote tracks. Now, they make tanks out of steel, and they also make them out of plastic. Now, we're using the steel tank in my 200 series Land Cruiser here. When you get a Brown Davis tank, there are things inside the tank that you don't get to see that help the tank function really well and set itself apart from other tanks that are being manufactured out there in the space. Now, my steel tank in the 200 have baffles in them. Now, these baffles are designed to stop the sloshing, okay, of the fuel in your tank. Now, that bit of sloshing, especially when you've got 200, get this, 273 litres of fuel in the tank of this 200, can actually cause the car to move. When you're on certain angles, can actually create like an instability in the vehicle's centre of gravity. So having a baffle in a tank is most important. Yeah, baby! The other things they have is what's called a swirl pot. Now, that allows your pickup point in your tank to pick up the last couple of litres in your tank, which is pretty important when you're trying to stretch it right out to get back from deep in a remote track to the fuel station. Now, how that works is basically it has like a little collection point around where the pickup is, and you'll get that every last drop out of the tank. The other thing, which I have used in the past as well, is a drain plug, and it's easily accessible, especially on my 200. I can actually get a jerry can underneath there and drain the fuel into the jerry can. It's exactly the right height. So if you need to get a bit of extra fuel out of the tank and give it to your mate to keep him going, or you do something silly like put a heap of unleaded in your tank when it's a diesel tank, that's got to really suck. You can actually drain the tank really quickly and easily. Now, there are 3 different types of tanks that Brown Davis make, and at All for Adventure, we got all 3. So let's start with the Isuzu D-Max Simon's truck. Now, it has what's called a replacement tank. Basically, you take out the OEM tank, okay, and you replace it with the aftermarket Brown Davis steel tank. Now, it bolts up in underneath, picking up some of the mounting holes of the OEM tank and some more, because it is nearly twice the size of the existing OEM tank. Number 2 is the MUX, the Isuzu MUX. Now, it uses 2 tanks. So it has 1 tank forward and 1 tank back. Now, that rear tank, when you need to fill the front tank, uses a pump, a transfer pump, which takes the fuel from the rear tank, pumps it into the front tank. You'll see a gauge, it'll start to fill up. That's a pretty cool little setup. Now, the third one, everyone knows the 79 Land Cruiser called Back in Black. So that was my truck that I built into this awesome weapon. Now, I had a rear replacement tank from Brown Davis, right? Now, that rear replacement tank basically increased my fuel capacity from the standard tank, 130 litres, and put in 185 litres. Now, what Brown Davis also have now, which is really cool for 79s, because they have a real weight distribution problem. Basically, they like to lift the front up and all the weight seems to be at the rear over the axle. So you put canopy, spare tyres, all that sort of stuff, and fill your 185 litre tank at the back. How's my balance point?
Yeah, you're good.
That's it, mate. They're a bit of a dog. And people are, doing full coil conversions now. They fix the track up, chassis extension like mine. Mate, when you put those things in, okay, it can help a little bit, but Brown Davis have fixed it, I reckon, have done a really good job at trying to fix it, and they've put a front auxiliary tank. So you leave your standard tank and you have a front auxiliary tank. Now, that can increase in size depending on how long, how much chassis extension you've got. All right, so they can build a few different tanks actually to suit that literage and that space under the middle of the vehicle there. Now, the way it works is in the kit comes a solenoid valve, which basically, okay, is the press of a button. You can be driving around on your standard tank or your rear auxiliary tank, and then you can press a button and switch over to your front auxiliary Brown Davis tank. Now, the advantage of that is we can get the weight and keep the weight forward by not using the rear, so keeping the fuel out of the rear and just use the front tank on short trips. If you're looking at doing long trips, then you can fill all the tanks, but draw from the rear first and keeping the weight forward. So it's a cool little feature that Brown Davis have done for the 79 Land Cruisers and hopefully make them a little bit better out in the bush. Now, did you know at Brown Davis, they've been making tanks for over 40 years. That's since 1978. They also make over 200 different tanks, not only for four-wheel drives, but motorhomes, mining. Mate, the list goes on. They really do specialise in building tanks.